we keep getting fed this lie, this myth, that faith is at odds with science. And then I look back, there's a chapter or two in the book where I look back at almost all of the great scientists were profound men of Christian faith. And I thought, how come nobody knows this? Why do we buy this idea that faith is at odds with science? But then the people who invented science itself, whether it's Isaac Newton or Maxwell or Boyle, or it go on and on and on, the titans, the pantheon of science, they were men of profound faith.
Hi, this is John Zmirak for The Stream. I'm Senior Editor at The Stream, and I'm interviewing one of the best friends of our publication, Eric Metaxas, author, entertainer, I hope someday future senator from the state of Connecticut, which is not his home state. We're talking about the overwhelming explosion of evidence for the existence of an intelligent designer behind the cosmos, behind the earth, behind the existence of life, and of course behind intelligent life that has a spiritual component that can step back and think and do science that is reliable. Because all through your life, you've had scientists, or rather people who read Popular Science magazine and fancied themselves scientists, or you've had people, entertainers like Neil deGrasse Tyson, tell you the universe is an incomprehensible place with no rationality, with no explanation, with no purpose. But we have rational minds that can make theories and understand all that. And we know the world is irrational by using our rational minds, which are reliable even though they're the accidental side effects of chemicals and electricity surging through things. This fundamental nonsense, which is like, imagine a voodoo priest in a South Sea island trying to do air traffic control for JFK, this disconnect has started to fall apart as more and more scientists are confronted with the evidence. Oh, crap, there's got to be a God or something. And I'll tell you, Eric, I feel that way sometimes. I feel that way.
Well, look, we all do. We've all got crazy feelings. But, I mean, it's just a funny thing because nobody ever says, like, you know what? I don't think math works. Math is stupid. You could hate math, but nobody can say it's stupid, I don't believe in math. Because you don't have that option. It's just, it is what it is. It's real, it works, and you don't have to become a mathematician, but you do have to acknowledge, like, it's real. 1 + 1 = 2. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. Well, honestly, when I was writing the book, Is Atheism Dead?, I couldn't believe how much I discovered that is nowhere to be found in the culture. In other words, in the culture, for example, one of the big themes of the book is this idea that faith and science, or faith and rationality, are somehow at odds. Everybody seems to have that idea. I discovered that not only is that not true, but there are other things. I mean, I'll give an example of what I mean. You get that idea has been sold in the culture over and over and over and over by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, by people like Carl Sagan, by people who made the ascent of man in the 70s. It's this idea that keeps coming out over and over and over again. And then you kind of look into it and you go, wait a second, not only is that not true, not only is faith compatible with science, but way more than that, Christian faith gave us science. And people think that can't be. Yes, that is an absolute fact. I'm not spinning. This is absolutely incontrovertible historical fact that if it weren't for Christians, the scientific revolution in the 16th and 17th centuries would have never come about. I never learned that in school. You don't see that on TV. It is a fact. I mean, you could look at it 1,000 ways. It is utterly the fact. It is utterly the case from history.
Let me offer you some support. There's a wonderful book by a Catholic priest and physicist, Father Stanley Jaki, Jaki, called The Savior of Science. And it's very technical. It's not user-friendly like your book, Is Atheism Dead? But it's an interesting book. And he goes into the creation stories of different cultures, of Egypt, of Mesopotamia, of the Greeks, and of the Jews. And he points out only in the Jewish worldview that we Christians inherited is the world separate from God. Is God rational? Is our rationality a mirror of his? If you look at the Mesopotamian cosmology, a god dies, and from his corpse they make a skin, and the universe inflates inside it. It's all irrational. The fundamental reality is irrational. Even in Greek myth, the universe is created when one god is castrated. It's just, again, the essence, the root of things is incomprehensible nonsense. And that is the kind of bad faith that would be in opposition to science. But God saying, "Let there be light," in the beginning was the Word. These are the seeds of a worldview that allows you to say, well, the universe makes sense. And I have a mind that can understand it because my mind is the mirror of the mind that made it. That gets you on the road to science. That gets you on the road to experimentation.
I guess I want to say, too, John, that we keep getting fed this lie, this myth, that faith is at odds with science. And then I look back, there's a chapter or two in the book where I look back at almost all of the great scientists were profound men of Christian faith. And I thought, how come nobody knows this? Why do we buy this idea that faith is at odds with science? But then the people who invented science itself, whether it's Isaac Newton or Maxwell or Boyle, or it go on and on and on, the titans, the pantheon of science, they were men of profound faith. Even Galileo, I call it the founding myth of atheism, that they make it sound like, well, here's the story. Way back, in 1600, Galileo went against the church, and it was this brave, rational scientist going up against the big, powerful church, and the church crushed him. That's completely twisted. Galileo was a man of utterly serious, profound, thoughtful Christian faith. And it was his faith that led him to push what he was pushing. It wasn't the opposite of faith.
And what he was pushing against wasn't the Bible. It was just Aristotelianism.
It was
Aristotle, who came from a pagan worldview, and by the way, Aristotelian science didn't work. Science based on that pagan worldview never advanced. You never saw experimentation because they didn't respect the integrity of creation as something made by God. They saw that the universe as something that had just evolved in accord with certain inexorable laws. And that is a great way not to do experiments, not to look at the evidence, and to believe that the earth revolves around that the sun revolves around the earth. So you do a great job in your chapter on Galileo. I thought you covered that marvelously. The next part of your book is very different. And I joked with you that this was a trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
Like a combo plate at a Greek restaurant. The Athenian combo. You get lamb chop. You also get scampi, but we also give you souvlaki, okay? It's worth it. Very good. $25. Very good.
Right. $14.97 if you pre-order at ericmetaxas.com.
That's right.
Actually, I should mention that. The book is a $28 book. If you pre-order it, and I'm saying this, if you go to my website, ericmetaxas.com, and you pre-order it, it is now on sale as of today, $14.97. Folks, trust me, it doesn't get lower than that. It's a $28 book. Color photos, 400-something pages. So I want to say that because really, John, you know my heart. I want to get this into the hands of everybody so that they can see the rationality of faith. It's been crushed by the culture, the secular culture, and many Christians have participated in this. We've marginalized faith. And the more I looked into it, I just said, this gets ridiculous. I mean, I know you're going to talk about the biblical archaeology, but half of the things that I discovered in the biblical archaeology part, the middle part of the book, I said, I never heard this. How come I never heard this? This is overwhelming evidence. We should at least, put it into the conversation, but people act like, oh, just the opposite is true.
Right. So in the section on biblical archaeology, you attack another 19th century superstition. There was the Darwinian materialist superstition. Another 18th and 19th century Enlightenment superstition is that the Bible is mostly myth.
Yeah.
It has a few facts scattered through it, but it's a totally unreliable document. It's kind of like the Norse myths or the Greek myths.
Right.
And it's something you could read for entertainment and inspiration. And if you choose to derive religious feelings from this, well,
right.
you know, we won't arrest you unless we're in the Soviet Union or
Right.
Massachusetts. But none of that is true.
No.
That is the idea that these are mythical documents. I mean, I thought that until recently because it's just stuck in the culture.
Right.
It is stuck in our heads the way we always envision Lucille Ball in black and white in 1952. She will always be there. Well, the Bible will always be a collection of myths of dubious reliability. And I believed in Christianity anyway, even thinking that. But you're showing us, no, I'm sorry, guys. We have the GPS coordinates for Sodom. You can enter them into your Uber, and they can drive you to the ruins of Sodom.
But I mean, think
proof.
about that. Think about that. We are now, but again, John, we didn't know this. The existence of Sodom, which is 1700 BC. We're going back to the first pages of the Bible, all the way back to Abraham and Lot. I mean, this is the very beginning. We think, well, that's definitely mythical. Well, according to Stephen Collins, who is an archaeologist, he said, you know what? The Bible says that if these places existed, they would be on the Kikar Plain north of the Dead Sea, around the Jordan River basin there. So let's look there. Nobody's ever looked there. And to sum things up, he discovers what is undeniably, I mean, you've got to read the details, otherwise you just think I'm just saying it. But I mean, it is a level of specificity. I think there's an article in the magazine Nature this month that deals with this. I mean, scientists are realizing, wow, we see what happened here. There was an airburst event. It was like a Tunguska, 1908 Siberia, a meteor or something like that, but just unbelievable level of devastation and whatever happened right then and so on and so forth. And the fact of the matter is, nobody's ever heard of this. This is not on the cover. You know, this ought to be on the cover of Time magazine if that magazine still existed. This ought to be on the cover of the Washington Post, the New York Times. Like, this is monster news. And this is just one thing that happened
and another
recently.
Thing, right. We found the city of Ur, the city where Abraham was called by God to go into exile to start the Jewish people. We have found the archaeological ruins of the city of Ur.
And that's like 140 years ago we found it. But, you know, people don't know this stuff. I mean, there's crazy stuff.
I didn't know it till I read your book. How about the evidence that the exodus from Egypt actually happened? I've kept seeing things from the 60s and 70s saying, well, you know, we don't know whether the Jews were ever actually in Egypt. There's no evidence for that. Well, now we have evidence for it. What is the evidence for the Exodus? Remind me what's in the book.
One, I mean, there's a bunch of different things, and we have to be clear too that before I say it, that even though we now have the evidence, nobody has heard of it. And the reason I wrote the book is so that folks like you now can go through life saying, oh, no, we know this happened. But I think it was the black obelisk of Shalmaneser or something else. There's a stele
of Ramses
that was discovered by Flinders Petrie in around 1890. He discovered a gigantic black basalt stele, like literally 10 feet high. They flip it over and they see all this writing on it. And they start reading and reading and reading. And they suddenly come upon something that they go, what's that? What's that? And they realize it is a reference to Canaan. And then it's a reference to Israel and stuff. And they know that this thing is dated from like 1300 BC or 1200 BC. I don't know what it was. But instantly they know that every liberal theologian, even back in the 1890s, was saying, listen, if the Exodus happened, it happened very much more recently. It certainly didn't happen, 1400 BC or anything like that. Well, here they have evidence that no, it happened back then, because we know that the man who created this stele, he was himself the pharaoh, and he's writing this stuff down, and we know this was 1300 BC. So this keeps happening, where you keep discovering things in the sand that give you one little piece, and then you go, oh, now we have to reevaluate everything, because this proves that Israel and Canaan, these things that we never heard of outside of the Bible, they were real and they existed at this time. And we get more and more corroboration. There are other things people have discovered. The black obelisk of Shalmaneser in around 1849, they moved it to the British Museum. It took 2 years to move this thing from where they find it in the sands of the Middle East all the way to the British Museum. They put it in a place of honor in the British Museum, and a Christian clergyman comes in to see it. People have already been in droves to see it because it's very historical. It's a big deal. But he reads what it says because he knows he's a student of this, I can't remember if it's cuneiform or whatever it was, but he reads it and he goes, uh-oh, I think they missed something. They mistranslated something. Suddenly, everybody knows that this thing that they have found is a corroboration of exactly what the Bible says. But it had been sitting in the British Museum for 2 years before he read it. And this keeps happening. Something is discovered. Right. Usually they don't know the full significance, and then they rediscover it and they go, oh my goodness, this is what it says. So there's many examples of that, of already having something but not knowing its significance, and that's one of them. And it changed everything. Once people realized that the Bible is a history book, they started scouring the sands of the Middle East. What else is out there? What else can we find? And they've been finding stuff. Actually, it's increased even in the last couple of decades. They're finding stuff in Jerusalem because they're doing all these excavations. And it's almost funny how much they found. In 1993, I think I was reading the New York Times, and they put this thing in there that they found a stele referring to the House of David. So the King David and the House of David, people said, oh, that's mythical. That's, like King Arthur. It's just way back in the mists of prehistory. And well, here it is on a stele. So now everybody has to reevaluate that. That's the kind of stuff that keeps happening over and over and over. But a lot of us haven't kept up with it. And the reason I wrote the book is to say, here's kind of a primer on what we know is true and how the Bible is an accurate guide to history.
And the dates of the New Testament keep getting earlier and earlier. In the 19th century, it was like people were saying, oh, the Gospels were written in 120 AD by a committee of people who were like the third cousins of the second friends of the Amway downline of somebody who had once heard Jesus' name mentioned in passing. But now they're like, oh, wait, actually, these things were written very close. And they may actually have been written by the people whose names they're on them, who were eyewitnesses to the events. So it all ties, it goes on into the New Testament as well.
Well, the New Testament stuff, this is where it gets really freaky. Like they'll find something like, a junior proconsul named Gallio, and then they find evidence, stone evidence that, oh yeah, there was a proconsul at this time named Gallio in this region, whatever. It goes on and on and on. And no one can just say, people made this up. You can say, I don't like it. But you can't say they made it up because history keeps corroborating it. They found the Pool of Siloam not many years ago. People said that's mythical. John just made up the name Siloam. It is honestly, it's pretty freaky. The more people look into this, the more I think that they will find their faith dramatically bolstered by this evidence.
Let me ask you a kind of a philosophical, existential question, and maybe there's no good answer.
Please don't, but go ahead.
Sorry. What do you think it means that we are now being forced to face all this evidence that our grandparents didn't have? Well,
that's a good. Century, that is a good question. I've thought about that.
Was God testing us then, or is He testing us now, or is He throwing this as a lifeline to us in these difficult times? Where do you see this in the economy of salvation, this explosion of proof that God is real that you document in your book?
I think I think that there are always several things happening at once, and that's obviously God in history. It's not just one thing. But it does seem to me as things get darker and more secular, God keeps raising the ante and saying, okay, you don't want to believe, you bought into the narrative, the secular narrative. Well, now I'm going to put this in your path, and now I'm going to put this in your path. And in other words, I'm going to make it less logical for you, and we will see do you want to look at the facts or do you want to look away from the facts? Because it has become preposterous. Again, I mean, I use these terms, astonishing, preposterous. It is so amazing to me. One thing actually that to me is powerful evidence, we haven't touched on it, but I say that philosophically, real atheism is untenable. And the proof of that is you take the three most sincere atheists of the 20th century, or to the top three, or close to the top three. Anthony Flew, who wrote the textbook on atheism, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus, who both of the kings of French existentialism. They looked more deeply, more intensely at the atheistic thesis than anybody. They wanted it to work. They tried to make it work. All three of them came to faith. That to me is like an unbelievable headline. I mean, we're not talking about Madeleine Murray O'Hair atheism. We're talking about very serious intellectuals trying to create a system where we can exist and live as human beings without God. They fail. And they fail and fail and fail, and they eventually come to think, I think, there is a God. But what they discover at the end of their lives, nobody's ever talked about it. I mean, a few people know that Sartre came to faith. Nobody, it seems, knows that Albert Camus came to faith, wanted to be baptized. Nobody seems to have heard of this, and I thought it's an honor for me that I get to discover these things and then write about them and put it in front of people and say, the people who took atheism the most seriously wiped their hands at the end of their lives. And so anybody who says, oh, I'm all for atheism or whatever, you really haven't looked at it seriously, because the people who have, they ultimately despaired of it and said, we know this can't be right. But nobody has heard of that. So in writing the book, this and other stuff, I put it in there because I thought people simply need to know this is true. When you mention the name Jean-Paul Sartre, when you mention the name Albert Camus, you need to know, oh, by the way, at the end of their lives, they came to Christian faith. How is this possible that happened? How is it possible we've never heard it? You and I, we read a lot of things. Yeah. We've never heard this. How has this been kept from us? Well, my idea is I don't want it to be kept from us anymore. God led me to it. I can't take much credit, but I want to get it out there. I want people to know when they hear Sartre, when they hear Camus, when they hear atheism, they have a different view.
Eric, I think that's a great note to close on. I want to encourage everyone at the stream and everyone out there to pre-order Is Atheism Dead? Join its early marketing team, and you can get the electronic version of it as part of the price.
Thanks for saying
that,
John.
Tell people about how to do that.
Yeah, I want to say I know, this is really cool. First of all, we need people to pre-order the book, not just to get the book when it comes out, but to pre-order it now for many reasons. But to encourage you, two things. If you go to my website, ericmetaxas.com, you can get it at an insanely cheap, believe me, $28 book, $14.97. There's a couple places, I can't tell you where, but if you go to my website, ericmetaxas.com, you'll find it. If you want to join the launch team, as John did, you will be sent an electronic copy of the book instantly so you can read it today. So you can read the book now. You don't need to wait till October 20th or whenever it officially comes out. So when you pre-order it, if you want to join the launch team, all you have to do is, the information will be there on my website, but you can read the book immediately if you like. You'll get the hardcover copy in October when it comes out, but you can read it right now. So, John, thank you for helping me get the word out. I appreciate it.
Thank you for writing the book, Eric. It was a real pleasure to read, and it's an honor to talk to you about it. God bless.
God bless you, my friend.